Okay, so I did a COD tier list a couple of years ago, and we've gotten a few more games since then. I've also been replaying a lot of the old games and seeing how they hold up, so I'm doing a big updated tier list for Call of Duty, but instead of going from worst to best, I'm going to go in release order from COD 4 onwards. Also, this video is just about standard multiplayer, so if you want to hear about the campaign or zombies, just go away, because that's not what this video is. Also, this video is divided into sections, so you can skip around if you want to do that. Not sure why you would want to do that, but you can do that. Okay, 1, 2, 3, go.
Nice execution.
You're doing terrific.
Hooray! S tier! Woo! COD 4 is one of my favorite games of all time, and it's one of the major reasons I got into multiplayer shooters in the first place. I put a stupid amount of time into the original on the 360, and then I played the hell out of the remaster on Xbox One, and now I play the modded PC version. That's super fun too. From a gameplay standpoint, COD 4 is almost perfect, and yes, I've heard the complaints. The simplicity of the 3-5-7 kill streaks keeps everything even, but still rewards you heavily for doing well. The map design is extremely good and very unique for COD, as Infinity Ward has said that they designed all of them with Team Deathmatch in mind, which is ironic, because I think some of these maps are the best OBJ maps in the entire franchise. The perks are very balanced, and while a handful of guns may be a tad too good, I think the quote OP accusations aren't quite right. The M16 is obviously pretty busted, but the time to kill in general in this game is super fast, so it's not like other guns can't compete with it on that front. You just have to work a little harder. The maps are very, very good, boasting the perfect blend of flanking routes and rushing lanes. Just COD 4 is very basic, but that's also because it was the first game in the modern, like, Call of Duty template, so I won't give it shit for being basic. Because overall, I love it, and I think it holds up to this day. Modern COD players might not like it because of how simple it is, but if you want just a raw military multiplayer shooter, and you aren't comparing this one to games that came out a decade later, it's extremely good. I truly think this is one of the best CODs ever released, even by today's standards.
Look at that fucking treasure trail.
I really had to argue with myself about where this one belonged on the tier list, because on one hand, it's one of my favorite Call of Duty games. I would say this is my third or fourth favorite game in the series. But then again, a lot of my love for this game comes from the fact that it was basically just a COD 4 asset flip. The gunplay, engine, time to kill, map flow, and sound mixing are nearly identical to COD 4, so this is one of those situations where if you like COD 4, you'll like this, but if you didn't like COD 4, you're definitely not gonna like this. But all that being said, World at War still feels like a completely unique game, mainly because of the weaponry. It plays a lot slower because the guns were all designed to be kind of crappy compared to COD 4. COD 4 was set in modern times, but World at War is set in the 40s, so automatic weapons fire a lot slower on net, and there's a heavier reliance on bolt action and semi-auto rifles. World at War is also a much grittier game than COD 4, which is a stylistic choice instead of a gameplay one, but I love it. It makes the guns feel a lot more impactful, and overall I think it's one of the most immersive COD games ever released. The maps are a bit more consistently good than COD 4 in my opinion, but that also may be because of the way the game played as a whole, if that makes sense. Like how COD 4 maps worked in COD 4 but probably wouldn't work in like Black Ops 2. That's kind of the vibe I get with a lot of the World at War maps. Like, I don't know if a lot of these maps would actually be good in a different game. But then again, that's also more of just an observation, not really so much a criticism. I'm not holding that against it. The maps are good for the game they're in, and that's what matters. And regardless, almost every map in World at War is good, and you know, despite the lack of originality in the gameplay, I adore this game. I'm gonna put it in A tier because it's an excellent experience, just not quite as good or original as COD 4.
You guys do CrossFit?
You can cross fuck off.
Crosspart.
Modern Warfare 2 is not a good game. You enjoyed it back in the day because it was broken and nonsensical, but if you take a critical eye to it, it's honestly kinda awful. I will give it some credit first. There are some really good maps, and the gun balance is some of the best in the franchise because just about everything is viable. That being said, there were also some awful maps in the mix, and the kill streak system was way too easy to exploit. Kills with streaks still counted towards your next streak, so if somebody managed to get a Harrier and an AC-130 or a chopper gunner, it was pretty much a guaranteed nuke. There were also some complete balancing oversights like noob tubes, one-man army, commando pro, and basically the entire handgun category being useless. This game doesn't flow well, like, it just doesn't. With mods, MW2 is a lot of fun. With certain things disabled, MW2 is a lot of fun. But out of the box, as God intended, Modern Warfare 2 is just not a good game. It has a lot of potential, and the IW4X project is definitely leagues better than vanilla. But if I'm stacking everything up next to each other, Modern Warfare 2 is going in C tier. It's better than some others, but it would never be my first choice.
How does a fella get caught up in that sort of business?
Well,
This was the first Call of Duty game I ever played. In 8th grade, I went over to my friend's house and we played split screen against bots for hours because neither of us had Xbox Live. And then when I finally got online, I played the shit out of this. I really, really like this game, but I also really, really don't like this game. Positives first. The maps are some of the best in any Call of Duty game to date. The party modes are fantastic. The wager match playlist is super fun. Demolition was arguably at its best here, and fun fact, Demolition is my favorite game mode. The sound design is great, the music is great, the art style is great. There is so much goodness to this game, but there are so many negatives too. The connection in this game was dog shit. Like, even by COD standards, anyone will tell you Black Ops 1 had dog shit connection. The gun balance is also some of the worst in the entire franchise, and the customization is a bit lacking. A lot of the framework of Black Ops 1 was copy-pasted from Modern Warfare 2, but slightly tweaked and in a almost entirely worse way. Because of the COD point system, there's a less direct progression system for the weapons, which discouraged experimentation with other guns. Not that it mattered very much, because there were only like 5 viable guns in the entire multiplayer. The attachments were also largely pointless in this game because, again, only like 4 or 5 of them were worth using on any given weapon, despite there being a lot of attachments. Black Ops 1 is a really fun game once you get going, but the lack of solid progression made it a little less replayable than I think it could have been. Still, what it has is excellent, and I think that's enough for me to give it a spot in A tier. I really fought with myself on this one being an A or B, but looking back at all the time I put into it online and offline against bots and custom games with friends, like, I think I'm being a little too harsh on it. I think this one deserves to be an A.
So we got hard. Somehow.
I've been playing this game a lot recently through Plutonium, and goddamn, it is honestly a lot better than I remember. I really liked this game when I was younger, but I always had this thought in the back of my mind that it was like only good because I was playing with friends or goofing around, but honestly, this game is just really good. Just about everything I didn't like about Modern Warfare 2 was fixed, and just about everything I did like about it was either unchanged or improved. The weapon progression is straightforward and satisfying, and there's a buttload of guns. The time to kill is a little slower than the last few games, which makes for more balanced gunfights, and there's really only 1 or 2 bad maps. Everything else is either average or good. Specialists really added a lot to the streak system, and it's genuinely hard to pick between assault, support, and specialists sometimes, because they're all really good and really satisfying. Plus, the move to point streaks instead of kill streaks made playing the objective way more satisfying. The gun balance isn't perfect though, because the MP7 and ACR dominate pretty much every scenario, and in the grand scheme of things, getting a Moab really isn't that satisfying once you've done it once or twice. I like that it doesn't end the game, but just getting a handful of kills and making the screen all blurry is kind of a letdown, but you know, then again, Moabs were meant to be more of a personal challenge, so I guess that's not an objectively bad thing. MW3 is a really good game that I think got tossed aside because it was seen as a step backwards for MW2 at the time of release. MW2 was this big explosive balls to the walls halls thing, while MW3 was much more grounded in the gameplay, and it admittedly had about 80% of its assets just copy-pasted from MW2. But from a gameplay standpoint, I see MW3 as an all-around improvement over the predecessor. I'm putting this one in S tier. The copy-pasted assets are undeniable, but almost everything else about this game is some of COD's best.
You were the toughest guy in Letterkenny. It's been some time. Now it's safe to assume that that title is as important to you now as it was then?
It's a doc with a boner drag weeds.
This is the best COD multiplayer, and in the words of mid-2000s post-grunge band Daughtry, it's no surprise that it's an S tier. I don't think there's ever been a COD game that has been such an all-around improvement to the formula. Like, Black Ops 2 introduced a lot of new things to the series, and every single new thing that it brought to the table was better than what came before. The time to kill was slowed down, it introduced the pick 10 system for classes, it introduced score streaks as a way to further incentivize playing the objective, it reworked the camo system to make you do specific challenges, it introduced weapon prestiges, it had an actual ranked mode, and then everything else about the COD formula, it just refined and made better. Visibility was improved, the time to kill was perfect, the spawns actually made sense for the most part. The weapon balance was almost perfect, party modes were top, custom games were top, theater mode was top, and it had some of the best maps ever put in a first-person shooter. Black Ops 2 is easily my favorite game in the series, and from an objective, critical standpoint, I truly believe it is the best COD multiplayer ever released. The Plutonium project is still very much alive on PC if you want to play this game again, so definitely download that and help keep this game alive.
Because it's too complicated. It's like algebra. Why you gotta put numbers and letters together? Why can't you just go fuck yourself?
I said a minute ago that Black Ops 2 was the biggest all-around improvement to the COD formula, so strap yourselves in, because Ghost was probably the biggest all-around faceplant. Infinity Ward was super desperate to shake up the formula with Ghost. It was the first game on a new console, it was for a brand new sub-series, and they just wanted to make a unique identity for that, but what they ended up doing was just changing things that had no reason to be changed, and it resulted in a horrendous multiplayer that's in D tier. I don't give a fuck if you like this game, sit down and listen to what I have to say. The maps are way too fucking big for 6v6, and no, this did not make the game more tactical or just, slow down the pace a little bit. No, it made the game fundamentally not skill-based. You spent more time running around looking for people than you did in actual gunfights, and since there weren't many actual choke points on these maps, the game played slower than ever. The time to kill was also way too fast, which made LMGs, shotguns, and most of the assault rifles just unviable because of a handful of ARs and SMGs completely dominating every scenario. Score streaks were reverted back to point streaks for some reason, which just reduced the amount of objective play once again, shocker. The squad point system removed a lot of actual progression that a COD multiplayer was supposed to have. The perk system was overcomplicated to a ridiculous degree. The kill streaks were underpowered and not rewarding at all. The SATCOM was the worst idea anyone's ever had. Then we have all the non-gameplay related things like the garbage sound design, the fact that 90% of the guns sound the same, the muddy visuals that made visibility some of the worst it's ever been, once again incentivizing slower playstyles. The only good thing I can say about Ghost is the fact that Gun Game and Infected were really fun, but since those two modes were fun in other games, it's not going to save it in this ranking. It's a D tier game and I don't give a shit if you liked it. There's been a lot of retroactive praise going around for this game in the last couple years, and I just want to sit all these people down and give a presentation about what makes good multiplayer shooter game design, because none of it is in this game.
Well, you don't want to go too kooky with accessories on your truck or your Jeep.
I've somewhat lightened up on this game in recent years, but not by much. I was very biased going into Advanced Warfare because I had my dick hard for Titanfall when it came out. And if you've played Titanfall 1, you know that the movement in that game is basically just Advanced Warfare, but just all around better. Now that I've revisited Advanced Warfare a little bit, I've cut a little bit of slack because it does do some things really, really well. The gunplay was smooth, the audio is nice, the graphics were really good for a 2014 game, and while none of the maps were amazing, none of them were bad either. Custom score streaks were also a nice addition to the mix, even if the streaks were all around kind of weak in this game. Where Advanced Warfare falls apart is the movement and the gun balance. The movement in this game is extremely choppy, and while some people really liked it, I actually felt it took a lot of skill out of the engagements because of how quickly you can change direction midair and immediately disengage fights. I like how aggressively you could play this game, but when the victim of a gunfight can become the attacker just by pushing a button twice and going in an unpredictable direction, it just makes the game a little frustrating. There was definitely a massive skill gap in Advanced Warfare because of this, but once you got to higher level play, the game got extremely repetitive and frustrating. And then we have the gun balance, which is some of the worst I've ever seen in a game with this many guns. The game was completely dominated by about 4 guns, and that's not including the variants, which were awarded at random and intentionally overpowered to get you to buy them. In my first COD tier list, I put Advanced Warfare in D tier, but this time around I'm scooting it up to a C. It's not as bad as I originally declared, but it's still not a very good game.
You're not fooling me, bud.
Black Ops 3 took a lot of the framework of Black Ops 2, which we've established is top tier, and kind of fumbled it in a lot of ways. And a lot of the great stuff from Black Ops 2 is still here, but everything that was changed was either made worse or kept roughly the same quality. I actually really like the movement in Black Ops 3 because of how fluid it is and how many options you have going from fight to fight. The specialists were also handled well because they weren't quite as cheap as they could have been, even if there were still a few cheap ones. Time to kill here is also pretty good. It's almost as good as Black Ops 2. But then we have some of the things that were made worse, like the map design, just the general map size, the questionable objective placements on a lot of maps that made matches complete blowouts. Like there were certain maps in this game that were nearly unplayable in certain game modes because of how blatantly unfair the objective placements are. I do like how the pick 10 system was reworked and it allowed more gun attachments, and I love how this game plays on PC. This is definitely a game that benefits from a mouse and keyboard over a controller. But then we have the problems with the supply drop system, and I really shouldn't have to elaborate much on this. Right now there are more guns locked behind supply drops than there are in the base game, and your chances of pulling one of these things is less than 1% in each attempt. And of course a lot of these guns are just fucking busted. I really don't know where to put this game. If I was just talking about the gameplay things, I think it would be an A tier, but with the shitty business model and the numerous downgrades from the previous game, I'm dropping it down to B, and I think that's fair. It's still a really solid game, but a lot of things could have been done better with little effort, and they just weren't for some reason.
4-leaf clover, make a wish.
Wish you weren't so fucking awkward, bud.
I'm putting Infinite Warfare in A tier. Eat my butthole. I got Infinite Warfare basically just to get Modern Warfare Remastered, but I ended up really enjoying this game. First, the positives. The time to kill is great. The movement was basically just Black Ops 3, but slightly faster. The map design was a lot smaller and tighter than Black Ops 3, so it really rewarded you for getting good at the movement and managing your jetpack and whatnot. And then there were a few movement exploits that added a lot to the skill gap and rewarded you further for putting the time in. Like Infinite Warfare had a lot more technically than people realized. The variant system here also felt a lot less intrusive than Advanced Warfare because you could just grind the game and directly buy the variants you wanted with in-game currency that you earned at a somewhat fair rate. Could have been faster, always can be, but, you know, huge step up from the Black Ops 3 system. Score streaks were also more about recon and support this time around instead of being super lethal and dominating, and the game was more about just how good each individual player was, and I loved that. There were negatives, yes. Gun balance is subpar, sound design super lackluster, color palette's bland, it's just a very gray game, and a lot of the maps were pretty forgettable, although I don't think there were any flat-out bad ones. Throughout the years on this channel, I've gone from calling this game not as bad as people think to just being a full-fledged defender, and you know what? Fucking fine. This game is way better than people realize, and I'll take all the dislikes for that. If you were to take the Call of Duty logo off the box, Infinite Warfare is just a really solid sci-fi multiplayer shooter.
They could probably survive a nuclear blast.
I think it's pronounced nuclear.
But it isn't.
I'm going to talk about this game in its current state for this video because something I think I did wrong in my last tier list was focus too much on the launch version. And don't get me wrong, the launch version of COD World War II was fucking awful and deserved to probably be in D tier. At best. But now that it's been reworked and a lot of extra content has been added, I think I can comfortably put it in B tier. There's a lot of content in this game, and while most of it is pretty average, like there's not a lot of really great content, but there's just a lot of, you know, solid content. And I can respect Sledgehammer for putting the work into fixing their baby, even if it meant compromising their original creative vision. I still have a lot of problems with this game. You know, the customization's not great. The abundance of DLC weapons that just aren't part of the core progression, spawns that are either way too close or way too far away from the action, the fact that they incorporated loot boxes to the beaches of Normandy somehow, and of course the fact that it's probably the least historically accurate World War II game ever made. The core gameplay of COD World War II is really good, and you're certainly getting a lot of bang for your buck if you buy it today. If you want a decent boots on the ground Call of Duty game, World War II might be your best bet on the current consoles, and I don't like that I just said that, but honestly I think that's the truth. If you're on the current Xbox or PlayStation and you want a Call of Duty game that feels more like the Golden Age Call of Duty, I mean, this and Black Ops 3 are kind of your best bets.
Fucking greasiest skid I ever seen. Chris Angel mind freak looking motherfucker.
This is another game I've softened to over the last few years. Originally, I was really dismissive of Black Ops 4 because of how different it was to other COD games and how much content it was missing compared to the predecessors, and while those things are still true, I have a slightly better outlook on it now. The movement and gunplay are extremely smooth, the manual healing and longer time to kill were really fun, and the new mechanics played really well on the older maps. But then we have all the negatives, like recycled content, cheap specialists, overpowered DLC guns, score streaks that did way too much damage for how easy they were to get. Black Ops 4 also had a serious lack of content and an atrocious business model. That's what makes this game so hard to talk about. If we were just talking about the pure gameplay of Black Ops 4, I honestly would put it in A tier. But since everything around the gameplay is so hit or miss, I have to drop it down a lot. The original maps were either average or terrible. The base guns were pretty well balanced, but the DLC weapons completely fucked the balance of the entire game. The specialist abilities were often cheap and skillless, but the bare bones playlist completely fixed that problem. So like, why? When you put everything together, I think Black Ops 4 belongs in C tier, which is where I think it was in my first video. So even though I've softened to this game, I still can't confidently put it any higher than C tier, because the flaws are just way too big.
No, I can do better. I wants to go again.
No, I think you should keep it.
Okay, good stuff first. This game looks and sounds amazing. Infinity Ward deserves every bit of praise they've ever gotten for their attention to detail. The game also feels excellent on PC. In terms of COD games on mouse and keyboard, this I think is the best feeling one. I also genuinely loved the progression of every weapon. Like every gun has a unique set of attachments, and it makes it feel really unique as a weapon to everything else. Like the progression just made things really satisfying, like how certain guns would unlock their mobility attachments early and others had it later, and how some guns got suppressors or barrels at different times than others, and that just made every gun feel unique because you were using different kinds of attachments earlier in the progression. It wasn't like other COD games where, you know, you get the red dot first and the suppressor and then FMJ, and it's like it's the same order all the time, you know? It was just, you know, just a nice touch. I need some water. Okay, I will now rapid fire everything I hate about this game. Time to kill was way too fast, weapon balance was atrocious, footstep audio was awful, dead silence as a field upgrade broke the entire meta, mounted camo challenges killed the game flow in every way possible, connection and netcode were fucking terrible, skill-based matchmaking actively punished you for getting good at the fundamentals of the game, the spawns were awful and made worse by the stupid 2-second delay between spawns because the game would choose a safe spawn, but by the time you actually spawned in, it wasn't safe anymore. The lack of a radar made the game feel RNG because you never had a clear understanding of where the enemy team was, which simply doesn't work in a game like Call of Duty. The map design was complete ass, and there were only 3 that I think were actually playable. The lack of map voting kept shit maps in rotation, and they just made lobbies dissolve faster because people would back out of the lobby if they got one of the shit maps, which was most of them. The spawn engine was blatantly broken because certain maps had entire regions that you would never spawn in, regardless of how safe they were compared to everywhere else. The camo system was designed for player retention instead of actual challenge, which made Damascus a giant grind for the player and also killed the game flow because people were just mounting in corners or crouch walking everywhere so they could unlock the next fucking camo. This game is complete garbage, but I still enjoy it more than Ghost. It's a D-tier game for sure, but it's getting a slightly higher spot than Ghost because some of the maps were fun in certain game modes. I would never recommend you buy this game for the multiplayer, but I can at least say it's not the worst multiplayer.
You guys are going broke.
Tits up or not, it's inappropriate.
Fun fact, I don't own this game because that's how low I think of it. Starting with Infinite Warfare, I could get new COD games for free through my work, but Cold War, I didn't even bother to get it. The beta was dog shit, and then I played the first few free weekends after launch, and it was still dog shit. I truly don't know how people think this game is better than Modern Warfare. Like, it's still a D-tier game, and I truly think it's worse than Modern Warfare. First, the positives. Colors are better, time to kill isn't as bad as Modern Warfare, even though it's still way too fast. If you think this game has a long time to kill, you haven't been playing Call of Duty for very long. I like the variety of weapons and like how differently all the guns behave from one another. And like it's not as good as Modern Warfare in that regard, but it's better than Ghost and Advanced Warfare. I also appreciate the map design not being quite as shit as the previous year, even if most of the maps are still shit. But then on the opposite side of the spectrum, almost everything wrong with Modern Warfare is still in here, minus the doors. Spawns are ass, weapon balance is ass, map design is ass, matchmaking is ass, and then there are some things that it actually managed to do worse than Modern Warfare. I mentioned this in my Warzone rant not too long ago, but the weapon progression in this game is fucking awful. Every weapon's progression is almost exactly the same, and it takes way too long, which makes grinding attachments tedious as balls. Also, class customization is a total joke because of how generous the wildcards are. Also, the score streak system is complete nonsense. I actually prefer Modern Warfare's kill streaks to this. Like, why are the streaks so expensive, and why is there a cooldown at all? Why are they called streaks if they don't reset upon death? And the whole point of using score streaks instead of kill streaks was to incentivize objective play, but this score streak system still discourages playing the objective. So what was the point of this system? And lastly, this game feels absolutely awful on keyboard and mouse. I don't know if it's a sensitivity thing or a game engine thing, but this game feels horrible on mouse and keyboard. I really tried to like this game, but after about 4 hours of the beta and 6-ish hours of the free weekends, I just didn't care. I can see why some people prefer it to Modern Warfare, but I view both these games in equally low esteem.
And you greenlit that tomfuckery?
Had to.
I know this game isn't out yet, but I put a solid amount of time into the beta, so let's just say this placement is subject to change, but from what I've played, I'm putting Vanguard in C tier. It takes the framework of Modern Warfare 19 and mixes it with some of the better elements of COD World War II, like the game pace and more straightforward map design. I did a full review of the beta not too long ago, so you can see my full thoughts over there, but basically this is the game I was hoping Modern Warfare would become with some updates. Modern Warfare is a horrible game, but it had a lot of small problems that could have been patched out. Vanguard fixes a lot of the small problems. It doesn't fix the big fundamental problems like kill streaks and dead silence and the map design philosophy. Again, this is preliminary, so take it as a grain of salt, but assuming the full game is the same level of quality as the beta, which is usually how COD games work, it's gonna be in C tier. Better than the last two, but still a lot of room for improvement, and unless those improvements are made, I'm not gonna buy it. And that's my COD tier list. This is where I would do an outro normally, but I'm tired and I want to chill the fuck out for a bit because I've been recording for a really long time and my throat hurts, so be sure to dislike this video on your way out, and at least I'll see you next time. Toodles.